To me, they went out of their way to show that Jade and the bus driver ended up here after experiencing one of the happiest parts of their lives. Jade had just sold his company, had just became like a multimillionaire, and ended up in Frumland. The bus driver, hello, we're back. We're back from
Hello.
season 2, episode 4.
The Way Gone.
This, in my opinion, is one of the best episodes in both seasons so far. What do you think?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
I enjoyed it thoroughly. And let's just dive right into this and kind of go through our thoughts about the episode. You know, our run through like we normally do, and then we'll stop and pause when we want to emphasize different points. So this episode started with a past scene, and it shows us Kenny and his family. They're arriving at the commissary after they need to move their dad there because they were afraid that I guess the dad had maybe opened the door or something like that. And they were afraid that because of his dementia and things like that, that this would be the safest place for him. And it was a really interesting scene because we really see how the mom and Kenny are really having a difficult time with this because their dad is saying he doesn't want to leave. He wants to stay in his home, but they convince him to stay. And later on, this becomes an important part because Kenny's mom has a lot of trauma and guilt associated with Kenny's dad's death. And they're kind of foreshadowing this here. So this was an interesting scene because we get to see Kenny before he becomes the Padawan, before he becomes the deputy.
Deputy dog.
Yes. So it transitions to Sheriff and Kenny. And this is when they're having a slight conversation. And Boyd says to him that in this kind of a place, you need somebody to watch your six. And this is when Boyd asks Kenny, would you mind being my assistant deputy here? Because in a situation like this, you need somebody to take charge and to give out orders. Even sometimes if the person is in charge doesn't really know what's going on. But it helps everybody to have somebody who's trying to take a leadership role. And I thought that was really interesting because I think it was a little foreshadowing because Boyd is actually losing himself as things have transpired through these different episodes. And I really feel like, who is that person for Boyd?
I think that he's trying to put a bunch of things together, like putting, occurrences together like a puzzle, trying to figure out what the big picture is. And I mean, I think a lot of his breakdown is because he's trying to make sure that he has the whole picture before he brings it to everybody. And he has nobody to go to chew that stuff.
Yeah.
Chew it up and see, throw spaghetti on the wall and look at these things and say, okay, now we can build, because Father Khatri seemed to be the person who he did that with, and now he's gone.
And that's a really great point, Candace, because just like you said, who does he go to for counsel? Typically people run to him for counsel and he provides that support. And like you said, now that the priest is gone, he doesn't really have that person. And that could definitely be a portion as to why he is kind of losing it. And now it transitions back into the present and Kenny is running over to Boyd and he's like, you just got to come with me. You just got to come with me. And it snaps away, but we kind of have an idea what he was about to tell him. And it transitions to Julie and she's with her mom, Tabitha. And she's just staring out the window. The water's running. And you could tell Tabitha is just like not there. And Julie walks in and is like, Mom, what's going on? Tell me what's happening with you. And she said, Mom, did you see those things again? And Tabitha finally tells Julie, yes, I saw him. And she's like, I need to talk to your dad. She was like, can you watch Ethan? And she's like, yeah, I'll watch Ethan so that you can go ahead and go talk to Dad. And it just transitions to Jade. He just barges in. I love Jade, man.
He's like the comedic relief.
He's the comedic relief. And I think also Jade, in a lot of ways, I feel like he represents in this place here in a lot of ways, like kind of almost like the average guy. He's just like, he's focused on the mission and he's trying to accomplish the mission.
I almost look at him as the audience watching, he's our proxy watching the show, everything that we're thinking. Because I was thinking that too. Like, when they had to move in to the house, I'm like, this house is getting kind of crowded, and this would be kind of annoying to see Jim and Tabitha and
all these people.
Yeah. I don't want to say that they're annoying, but like, I would be kind of like, you're disturbing my peace, my little setup.
Exactly.
And he said exactly what I was thinking. Like, what the?
He's like, we just got the colony house people out, and now you guys are here. Like, keeping it so 1000.
Like, he can't find a place to be by himself to think, and relatable.
Yeah, because we all need that space. We all need that space. And I like that he's one of the few characters, him and the other gentleman, that's kind of like the hothead. They're one of the few
Captain
people.
Asshole.
Yeah. they're kind
hairline.
of one of the few people that just kind of tell it like how it is. They don't sugarcoat it or anything like that.
Do you really think that's what he is? Like, he's not sugarcoating anything, or do you think he's just I don't see him being as that keep it real guy. I'm gonna keep it real, because what exactly has he done to keep it or said to keep it real? All I see is somebody who wants to disrupt this organization that's going on because he's not in control.
That, and when you look at this character, I think on the surface he looks like a guy that wants to take control, but I think also on the inside, I think he's scared. And some people, when they're scared, they do different things. The whole fight or flight type situation. And he seems to be the type that when he is scared or doesn't know what's going on, he wants to have bravado and stick his chest out and act like he's not afraid, or act like he doesn't need help, or act like he's got it going on, when in fact he really doesn't in a lot of situations.
That's true. Some people, fly, run away. Some people freeze and don't know what to do, get kind of catatonic in their emotions, and other people kind of want to fight and just, so.
And then, so Kenny, he shows Boyd Sarah, and she's sitting at the table. And she looks so funny sitting at this small table in the dark in these lights. And he asks her, what happened? And they're having a conversation, and she's telling Boyd what happened to her. She said, when I went in the tree, I ended up here. And then she asks Boyd, what happened to you? And Boyd completely beats around the bush and doesn't answer the question.
And I'm, again, frustrated with that, because there's some conversations that need to be had. Share information, again, so we can put these pictures together and figure out what's going on.
And I think, honestly, Boyd is not telling a lot of this information because, and Donna alluded to this later on in the episode, you need the leader to be strong. And there's this quote where it says that nobody ever checks on the lion to see if he's okay, right? The leader has to remain strong, because Boyd was holding this place together. So I completely understand Boyd's fear of not necessarily divulging this information to everybody, because that's going to scare the heck out of a lot of people. But he has a lot of confidence in Sarah, and that she truly understands this place. I would think she would be one of the few people that he might actually tell the truth to, because it makes sense to me, being that who she is and how he feels like she really has this connection. But then Sarah says something really interesting. She says, she feels like the boy said that we feel like we're making this place angry. And as we talk more about this episode and the house crumbling, their house crumbling and stuff like that, I'm going to bring that back up again. But this is when it transitions to Boyd. He's walked back upstairs. Kenny is upstairs pacing back and forth. And Kenny wants Sarah punished. And this is when Boyd goes through extensive steps to try to convince Kenny that we need her, because she is connected to this place in ways that we are not. And she may be one of the keys to getting out of this place. Kenny is pissed and he's upset, and he wants to hold her accountable. And Boyd does something. He has a Freudian slip, and he says, when she killed those people. And Kenny's like, what do you mean, those people? Because people are still unaware that she has literally killed like 4 people. She killed her brother. She killed those 2 people, Kenny's father.
His father,
and
the nurse that was inside of the clinic keeping watch.
And the first guy that came in there with Jade. Right. Remember, she stabbed him in the neck in the episode in season 1.
Right, and she tried to kill Ethan.
Exactly. So she is on a spree so to speak.
And remember what I said in when we were watching it. I have a theory.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how you escape.
To killing people?
No, not. I think the monsters. I think the monsters. You have to let the monsters kill you, and that's how you escape. I don't know. It's a theory. It's a theory.
I can see it. So they go back and forth, and Boyd is still trying to convince him we need her. And Boyd yells out to Kenny, and he says, "I'm not putting her in a fucking box." And then he starts to collapse, and he walks outside, and we can see these worms. And I want to take a moment to talk about these worm things, right? I mentioned in a previous video that I think the worms help Boyd. A couple of people in the comment section said, "Hey, did you guys notice, Watchers on the Wall, that in the previous episode when Boyd was running through the forest trying to escape the monsters, one of them even said he was hiding behind a skinny ass tree and the monsters." That's what she said. She said he was hiding behind a skinny ass tree and the monsters still didn't see him.
You know what it reminded me of? I don't know if you ever grew up watching A Boy Meets World. But there's an episode where the two kids are hiding in the closet, and the principal opens the door, and one of the kids says, "Maybe if we stay really still, he won't know that we're there." Like, just that's what that reminded me of. Like, if I hide behind this skinny ass tree and I be really quiet, they won't know that I'm here.
Yeah,
like,
but they didn't notice. And somebody said, what if one of the powers that the worms gives Boyd is that he is not easily findable by the monsters? And I was like, you know what? That is a really good idea because they couldn't see him. But the reason why I say that is when Boyd was collapsing and he was walking out from the argument with Kenny and the worms started to show, that's when the worms appeared, because up until that point, Boyd had looked healthier. And what I'm wondering is if the stress triggers the worms where kind of the body feels like he's in danger and the worms kind of kick on and do different things. And being that Boyd has just got these worms, I think that the worms would do many positive things for him.
So it's like Super Mario Brothers when they eat the mushrooms, the different mushrooms.
I don't want to call it Super Mario Brothers, but
I mean, think about it. I mean, the trees are kind of like those green, the green sewage lines that they go through, right?
That I guess so. So you're transported through different portals and stuff. But I think that those worms, we're seeing the beginning part of it with him. I think Boyd's going to have different abilities. And I think that they're going to gradually increase as his body gets used to it or whatever the case may be. So that's why I think that we saw those worms, is because the argument with Kenny triggered some type of immune response from within, kind of like a fight or flight. And that's what caused the worms to kind of come out. So we'll see later on. And this is when it transitions to Julie, and she's at Colony House and she's speaking with Fatima. And they are having a good conversation, and Fatima asks Julie would she love to be a bridesmaid. One thing that stood out to me when Julie was getting ready to head over to the Colony House is that when she was getting ready to head over to the Colony House, and I'm so tired of this Apple Watch, she told Ethan, "Hey, do you want to go see Victor?" It was like she was looking for any reason to get over there to Colony House and then immediately jump in Fatima. Is it Fatima? Fatima's face to have a conversation, because we know from previous episodes that Julie has a slight crush on her. But then she says, "Hey, would you mind being in my wedding?" And she's like, "Oh, you're gonna have the wedding?" She's like, "Yes."
Again, Fatima does not look excited about this wedding.
Yeah, it's. I think she's coming to a realization okay, let's go ahead and have it here. And this is when it transitions to Victor. He's now in his room and he's drawing, and this is probably one of the best scenes that I enjoy the most. And Ethan knocks on the door, and Victor is like, "Bruh." Victor is over this mess, yo. It was so funny. And he opened the door, and little Ethan is there. And he says, "Can I come inside?" And he's like, "What do you want?" "No." And he said...
It's like Victor was standing looking down at him like, "Are you going to steal again?"
Yeah, he said, "Can I come in?" He said, "I don't know. Are you going to steal anything again?" And then he says, "No." He said, "I'm sorry." He said, "Well, say it louder." No, he's like, I told him not to steal your things.
And he said, "You should have said it louder." Like, what?
in my mind, I'm like, and I know Victor, he's gone through a lot of trauma. He's been here. He's probably not been able to socialize and grow up. But it just they're doing a good job of showing in some ways how just like how out of touch Victor can be at times, and maybe rightfully so, in that he expected a child to be able to hold a grown man accountable. I just thought that was such a good scene. And he's still drawing these things, and he says, basically Victor kicks him out, and he said, before I leave, I wanted to give you these things here. And he gives him some markers so he can continue to draw. Then it transitions to Elgin and Julie, and they're talking. And, once again, they show Elgin, but we don't get a lot out of him. He's a man of few words as well. Mm-hmm. Didn't hardly say anything. He was sitting in like a barber's chair, like he's about to get a fade. And in the barber's chair. And they have to leave because Ethan storms out, and he's pissed off because Victor didn't want to have a conversation with him, and they go ahead and they leave. And this is when it transitions to Boyd. He's in the doctor's office, and he's being examined because, of course, he collapsed. And they have some interesting dialogue and conversation. But what was interesting to me is he's like, what about these spider bites I got? And I thought it was so weird that Boyd would take his shirt off, because how did he know that the worms won't come back on or something?
Maybe he can feel them.
This is true. Maybe he could tell they're coming on. And so he's showing her the spider bites. And then while he's doing that, he accidentally reveals that big scar. And she's like, what happened there? And he doesn't tell her. And he's like, well, I got scratched up against a tree. And once again, it's probably Boyd saving everybody's sanctity by not telling what's really going on. Because if he says this to these people, it's going to shift everybody's world probably upside down. He says
something really funny where, Kristen was saying, part of Parkinson's, it's, there's some depression. And he is like, Kristen, and everybody here is depressed. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. And it's just like, you see Boyd, he's having a huge character arc, right? And it's interesting to see if he will get back on track to being the person, not necessarily bubbly and stuff, but will he get back to being that strong leader figure again? Because I feel like right now he's wavering in his leadership and things like that. And it transitions to Ken and his mom, and they're having a conversation in the diner. And she's saying, hey, baby, I'm a little worried about you. How are things going? Because she's worried about her baby. She, he was making that connection and with his, girl. Mm-hmm. And then her fiance comes back in town, and he's kind of been thrown to the side. And she also says, hey, you and Boyd are working too hard. You guys need to slow down and take care of yourselves. And once again, it's showing that his mom, what is Kenny's mom's name?
I don't think we ever get her name.
No, we get her name. She is like one of the best characters here, because she is always so thoughtful and caring about other people. Mm-hmm. She is so selfless, and also willing to stand up when people are not doing the right things. She's just such a wonderful character. So then it transitions to Jade. He goes to the bar because he wants to get some freedom. And guess who's there? The bus driver. And they have an interesting conversation. And guys, I said this in the From Facebook group. And I was joking, but I was somewhat serious. They were like, man, that bus driver looks so down. And I made a joke and I said, she looks like the type that took over somebody's shift for him. And she's pissed off like because she's in Fromland. And man, it's not exactly like what I said, but it's kind of like what I said. And then she said that she was there.
She wasn't supposed to be there, though.
She wasn't supposed to be there. And we learned that she recently was like a college graduate, recently paid off some student debt and stuff like that. And driving the bus was a way to gain additional income. And she talked about how she actually was going to resign. She was going to freaking resign. But she's like, I want to go on a vacation. And she continued to work a couple of more weeks and ends up in damn Fromland.
Well, now she gets a vacation, a permanent vacation.
A permanent vacation. And her and Jade have a wonderful conversation. There was a lot of great conversations in this episode. In previous episodes, we were complaining about how it seemed like whenever our main characters were having conversation and dialogue, it wasn't meaningful. They completely flipped that switch here in this one. A lot of meaningful conversations. So they're talking, and the bus driver is really in the dumps. And she's blaming herself like, I got these people stuck here. I'm the bus driver. And Jade, man, gives her some great advice. He was like, you're not to blame here. He was like, nobody wanted to be here. There was probably nothing you can do without getting here.
Did you see the tree? When Elgin said turn the bus around, she's like, I should have turned around, but did you see the tree?
Mm-hmm. And I want to point this out because I think that this may be very important. And I was thinking about this last episode, but I didn't say anything. To me, they went out of their way to show that Jade and the bus driver ended up here after experiencing one of the happiest parts of their lives. Jade had just sold his company, had just became like a multi-millionaire, and ended up in Frumland. The bus driver just graduated with college. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days in her life, or points in her life. Ends up in freaking Frumland. Who else was it? There was somebody else that something happened positive, and Boyd had just got his boat. His wife had just bought him a boat.
They had retired from the military.
Just freaking retired. So here you have people who are supposed to be in the best phases of their life, and they're fucking in Frumland. And I'm wondering what was that about, because I feel like they emphasized that in that conversation that the bus driver had along with Jade. And I'm like, what's going on there? So maybe there's going to be something there, maybe not. So then it transitions to Tabitha. She heads over to the hospital because she wants to see Jim, and Jim is not there. And Jim is outside staring at the house and the newcomers at the bus stop. Not the bus stop, but at the bus, and they're packing their things. And this is probably one of the most meaningful conversations that we've had. And I shouldn't just say meaningful, but a conversation that we've been itching for somebody to have, which is to really start to dissect what the fuck is going on. So he's talking to her, and he says that Jim, they're having a conversation. He said, look, baby, you told me that those wires aren't connected to anything. And Tabitha's like, I know, babe, I know this makes sense. He's like, no, I believe you. He was like, first of all, it doesn't make sense. He was like, that's not natural that you have electricity and it's not connected to anything. Then he says, this doesn't make anything. He says, Jim says, somebody answered on the radio. And not only did they answer on the radio, but this person knew that you was digging a hole in our house. And says, your wife shouldn't be digging that hole. He said, that's why I ran over here. That's how this house collapses on us. And then this is when Jim says, what if this place is designed in a way to see how we are reacting to the situations that we're being placed in? He said, what if this shit is a fucking experiment? And I'm like, yes, finally, somebody is starting to wonder what's going on. And I want to take a moment, I guess, like to pause it for a second, because you've seen it on our comment section. A lot of people are wondering, is this like a VR game simulation type situation? And I had always kind of felt it could be something like that. Or, is somebody watching this thing to see what they're doing? I know in season 1, a lot of people are wondering, is this like an alien spaceship and the aliens are watching to see what's happening? But the more and more we see AI popping up in society and stuff like that, I'm wondering if this is some type of system similar to what you've seen in the Matrix, where people are like connected into the system. Not necessarily maybe with things in the back of their head, but neurologically they're connected to some type of video game or computer system to see how these people are responding to these different situations. And I really feel like when they were talking about how the wires don't lead to nothing, when Jim was talking about what if we're being fucking watched, really interesting.
And maybe Elgin's reaction to being there again is because he's been there before.
Been in the game or something. What if when you get out the game, I don't know. But yeah, most definitely. Then it transitions to Boyd. He's in the office. Back in his office, he's washing his face off, and he walks out of his office, and the priest is there. And he's having this interesting conversation. This also what makes me feel like this could be a VR thing. Because Boyd is like, this ain't real. I have to be hallucinating. This just can't be. And they're having a great conversation. Like, a great conversation is being had here. And he asks him, how are you doing, sir? Are you going to tell Kenny what Sarah did to his dad? How would Kenny feel when he finds out that you lied to him about all this stuff? And Boyd says, I had to do it. He said, do you think it'll be better off if he finds out? And then and what's interesting is that the Father Khatri is trying to convince Boyd not to tell him this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why? It's like it's somebody who's manipulating this game or this system or whatever this is. Do they understand that Kenny, like, do they understand like Kenny or different characters, once they start to find out the truth, does it mess up the game a little bit? Because now people may start to wonder what's really going on here. So this conversation is really good. And then probably one of the biggest things that come from that is he says that, remember what Ellis said? He said, everyone needs something to hold on to when they're here. He said, now that Kenny's father is dead, you are that thing that Kenny holds on to. Broken people don't survive here. Deep conversation. I mean, like, beyond deep. And really putting Boyd in a tough situation of, do you tell Kenny what's really going on? But more so besides that, a tough situation of what they're going to do with Sarah, right? So then it transitions to Jim and Donna, and they're having a very good conversation. And probably Donna says one of the realest things during this conversation, and that she says, look, I heard the voice too. And she's like, I heard the voice say, you know, she shouldn't be digging that hole. So she understands that something is
and
potentially...
then the storm came.
Yes. Something is potentially watching and doing different things, right? So this could go back to that VR game thing. They made the storm come. The house collapsed. They made the house collapse. But then Donna says, look, if you go around telling people this stuff, that people are watching this thing, could be watching us. She was like, you don't understand what the repercussions of that could be if you start telling people that. And she says, I need you to keep quiet about this. And I was like, very interesting that Donna said that, because even though Donna and Boyd are not talking, they're kind of juggling the same thought processes.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, they're juggling the same thought processes, because Boyd is wondering, how much do I tell? How much should I tell? And Donna is doing the exact same thing.
Right.
She's like, how much of this should I tell? How much of this should I be talking about? And as they're having that conversation, we hear an argument taking place. It's our hothead, and he pushes another member in Colony House and then kicks the heck out of him, which was an interesting scene because he was touching his things. And we all know that the people in the Colony House, they share. They share women. They be sharing up in the Colony House. And so dude basically bosses up on Donna. He's like, look, don't touch my shit and we won't have problems around here, basically. And I'm like, dang, this dude is like really trying to take over things and make the people understand who he is. So it transitions to Sarah and Kenny, and they're talking. And what's funny is Kenny's perspective has now changed. Initially, Kenny was like, put her ass in a box. But Boyd was able to convince him, hey, we need her. Let's let her stay around. And Kenny is actually saying to her, look, baby, you don't belong in a box. I know you're feeling guilty. I know you're feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders, but maybe you can help us. This place makes people make poor decisions. We need you. We can find a way to forgive you. But Kenny doesn't know all the things she's done, all the people she's killed. And it cuts away, but we have a feeling that Sarah has told him, look, I'm responsible for your father's death. Mm-hmm. And then it cuts away, and now we see Donna and Fatima. They're trying to calm Donna down because she grabs that axe. She loves that axe. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to have to tell this dude he's not going to be running a Colony House. And she tells him to get the hell out of here. To the guy, he's like, I'm not going nowhere. And she slams the axe into the wall. And he says, you need to get the hell out of here. And he just gets up and leaves, which is weird to me. He's been pushing and putting his hands on people, punking people. And you have a middle-aged woman, and you just bow down to her?
What do you expect him to do? Beat the old lady up?
I didn't want her to beat her up, but I just wanted him to
intimidate her?
I don't know. It just was, to me, I was like, dang, like you had all that fight for everybody else, and now you don't got no fight for Donna. It was just like,
he's a punk.
Yeah. I guess he's like a bully. He could probably tell who he could, punk and do things to. But she's like, I want you out of here. I'm like, wonder where she's gonna take him. But she's taking him to that bus.
But you remember when they were having that argument, I said take his ass to the bus.
I put this under comment of one of our previous videos. They need to use that bus. And it's funny. I think that when they put him in that bus, it's going to be for a reason, because I think he's going to see something that may be helpful. Because oftentimes people close the shades and they've never really seen them. Like, they don't really watch the monsters, or we never. I think he's going to be able to see something that may be helpful. But I feel like they should take the bus, put the a Townsend or two in there, and drive it around and try to find a way to get out of farmland. So like park it, go through the forest. If they can't find a way out, get back on the bus so that they're safe. Similar to what Boyd and Sarah did, but you would be a little bit safer in that you're in the bus, so to speak.
I mean, would you? You're going to make them, whatever is making the house collapse and the storm come, you're going to make them mad.
I guess it's very possible. So then it transitions to Boyd. He's trying to go into church to talk to Kenny. And the old lady's like, oh, Kenny's not here, baby. I think she is a plant. Like how we thought the barber was. I mean, not the barber. The bartender. I think that old lady, what's her name? Boyd and Tilly. I think her name is Tilly or something like that. She just always seems to come in out of nowhere. But she's like, no, he's in a medical building. And this is when it concludes, but it has one of the most powerful scenes. And we're catching a huge character arc for Kenny. Because this is when we walk in and Kenny is staring in that room where his father was found dead and eaten alive. And it's become apparent that Sarah told him that I killed your father.
Wonderful acting. Mm-hmm. Superb acting.
It was. Like, you're really starting to see. And then Kenny is so frustrated with Boyd not telling him for a variety of different reasons. But one of the reasons I think it really hurt Kenny is because he said that I never hear my mom crying. But every night I hear my mom crying and sobbing at night because she blames herself for their father's death. Because she felt like if I was there with him. And we also discovered that they thought he was the reason the monsters got in. They thought that with his dementia and his decision making, he opened the door, but it turns out it didn't. So they have been carrying that guilt for so long. And Kenny is really upset about this. And he's like, basically, that bitch has got to go in the box. She's got to go in the box. And Kenny takes his badge off, throws it on the ground, and said, you can watch your own fucking six. Wow. What an episode. From did a great job with this episode.
The acting
was
top notch.
The acting was if there was a scene that you said just really took it away for you, what would you say it was?
The conversation between Boyd and Kenny. The last scene.
Powerful scene. And when that scene was happening, I then noticed that Boyd didn't have. I thought Kenny was going to snatch Cher's badge off. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not but even though Kenny taking his off, that was still powerful too. That was still powerful. And I think a lot of this stuff is becoming readily clear that they are being watched by something. Whether it's people who are watching this like Squid Game type situation or whatever, or if this is some type of VR simulation. And I'm starting to lean more towards something like that now, because you have a lot of things that are happening that are just defying all rationale. The house just being all of a sudden just deciding to collapse. Like they were able to press a button, make the house collapse. Electricity, it's running to cords that just go to nowhere.
But what about the monsters? What about the apparitions that Tabitha is seeing and that Sarah is seeing, and that what? How can we explain that?
I mean, maybe from a VR perspective, they're putting these things in these people's heads so that they talk and say different things to different people, to
kinda
influence
like
the game.
In a game where you meet up with somebody and then it's like press X for a conversation, press Y for
and it creates these interesting dynamics to where things are happening to people that maybe otherwise wouldn't be happening. But I'm definitely leaning toward that. I had always felt like they were being watched somehow. But we, there were all kind of theories like aliens, they were on a spaceship, VR type situation, that it was a human game where humans were watching them. But really good episode. I know that we say this every week, man. We got to get back on doing our midweek videos because the people, you guys have great comments. What do you guys think of the episode? What do you guys think is happening in Fromland? And if you had to make some predictions, what would they be? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And hopefully we will see you guys midweek. Thanks for watching.
Happy Mother's Day.